List of landscape architects.
A landscape architect is someone who practices landscape architecture. Regulations of the profession vary by country and state. The terminology has evolved to include those once known as landscape gardeners, landscape designers, architects, surveyors or civil engineers, particularly those from the 19th century who practiced before the term landscape architect was coined. Landscape architecture was also differentiated as a profession in the United States earlier than in other parts of the world, so this ambiguity has persisted to the present day. In much of Europe, for example, landscape architecture is not a distinct profession, but there are many significant historical and contemporary examples of landscape architectural design projects. Though their influence on landscape architecture may be great, this list precludes gardeners, botanists, writers, theoreticians, ecologists, artists, and others who did not practice landscape design at a site scale and were not trained as a historical landscape gardener or contemporary landscape architect.
Africa.
In-site landscape architects.
Australia. 19th, 20th and 21st century.
Edward Latrobe Bateman, Percy Everett, Walter Burley Griffin, William Guilfoyle, Clement Hodgkinson, Harry Howard, Joseph Maiden, Richard Schimburg, Edna Walling, Richard Weller.
Europe. 15th–16th century.
Paolo da Merigliano.
17th–18th century.
Charles Bridgman, Capability Brown, Henry Hoare, William Kent, George London, André Lenotre, Humphrey Repton, John Vaughan Brew, Henry Wise.
19th century.
Edouard André, Joachim Carvalho, Jean-Claude Nicolas Forestier, Baron Horseman, Gertrude Jekyll, Joseph Forsyth Johnson, Georg Kupfeld, George Loddiges, John Claudius Loudon, William Andrews Nesfield, Joseph Paxton, Prince Hermann von Pückler-Muskau, William Robinson, Henry Winthrop Sargent.
20th–21st century.
Harold Ainsworth Peto, Inside Outside, Petra Bless, Fernando Carrancho, Gerard Siolek, Brian Cliston, Sylvia Crow, Ernst Kramer, Sylvia Daycord, Ian Hamilton Finley, John St. Bodfan Grufford, Ralph Hancock, Robert Holden, Geoffrey Jellicoe, Charles Jenks, Ralph Hancock, Robert Holden, Geoffrey Jellicoe, Charles Jenks, Peter Latz, Ricardo Libriero, Gudmund Nyland-Brandt, Francisco Paes de la Cadena, Russell Page, Pietro Porcinai, Niccolo M. Rubio y Tudori, architect, Vitus Sackville West, Jorge Subarana, Nicola White, Andrew Wilson, West 8, Javier Winthuizen.
Asia. Contemporary.
Kamel Mahadeen, Shlomo Aronson.
North America. 18th century.
Pierre Charles L'Enfant, Thomas Jefferson.
19th century.
Daniel Burnham, Horace Cleveland, Andrew Jackson Downing, Charles Eliot, Beatrix Farrand, Horatio Greenough, Jens Jensen, Warren H. Manning, Frederick Law Olmsted, Jr., John Charles Olmsted, Samuel Parsons, Ellen Biddle Shipman, Ossian Cole Simmons, Fletcher Steele, Calvert Vaux, George Edward Kessler, Theodore Worth, Frederick Nussbaumer, Jacob Widemann.
20th–21st century.
Charles Morris Anderson, Pamela Burton, William B. Calloway, Marjorie Sewell Courtley, Thomas DeLiver Church, Gilmore David Clark, Lewis J. Clark, Marion Kruger Coffin, James Corner, James Frederick Dawson, Garrett Ekbo, M. Paul Friedberg, Catherine Gustafson, Richard Haag, Lawrence Halprin, George Hargreaves, J. B. Jackson, Grant Jones, Dan Kiley, Walter Hood, Ian Machag, Robert Moraes, Laurie Olin, Janet Meakin-Poore, Joe A. Porter, James C. Rose, Hideo Sasaki, Martha Schwartz, Edward Daryl Stone, Jr., Michael van Valkenburg, Thomas Chalmers Vint, Peter Walker, Lloyd Wright.
South and Central America. 19th century.
Carlos Tais.
20th century.